So we're here with James Bridle, who's a writer and publisher, and he's just given us a fantastic presentation about the form and the future of the book. Now, James, can you tell me a little bit about your thoughts on the temporality of the digital realm versus books and the experience with them?
Yeah, so I've got a bit obsessed with the temporal nature of the book recently, because I've spent about 5 years shouting at publishers to try and get them to do ebooks, because 5 years ago they weren't, and they refused to believe they'd ever happen. And they're starting to now, and that's great, and then I'm starting to worry that maybe we haven't got it quite right. And so I've been looking back at some of the reasons why people initially believed ebooks wouldn't work, and they're quite interesting. Or actually they're quite dull, but kind of interestingly dull. Like, you can't read them in the bath, people have said, or you can't read them, it's not comfortable to read them in bed, or they don't smell like a real book, and they love the feel of the paper and all this kind of stuff. And all these arguments are basically rubbish for various reasons, and they're all refutable. But what's interesting about them is they're all arguments about the physicality of the physical book. They're all just about the book as physical object, and we know that the book is far more than a physical object. So what makes it more than just a physical object? Well, it's the fact that it's an experience, and it's an experience over time. And then how is that experience over time kind of manifested? And there's a few things that the paper book does really well, in that it allows you to appropriate it, whether that's as obvious as writing your name in the front, or it's simply just the kind of markings and the time that you spend with it. And it allows you to interact with it and claim it in kind of a number of different ways. But, those aren't the things that we've been making ebooks do so far. So the book's experience in time is something we've kind of yet to apply to ebooks. And so I think it's just important that we start thinking about that, essentially.
And you also discussed a little bit about the idea of the digital experience and how hard it is sometimes to actually capture a physical souvenir. I mean, books in themselves, as you were saying, really are kind of like they become souvenirs after you've finished reading them. Can you tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on the digital experience and, what you see of, where are we going with how we can actually souvenir those?
Yeah, well, it's just weird. It's like a mental block I keep running up against, which is that souvenirs are really important to us. When none of us are actually really natural minimalists. We like to keep things around that remind us of other things and these experiences we've had. And yet we're doing more and more stuff in the digital realm for which there are no souvenirs. And so I was trying to think, what are digital souvenirs? And I haven't got any good examples of them. I'm not sure the souvenir itself can exist digitally. And so then are there maybe physical souvenirs of digital experiences? And again, I'm not quite sure what those are. As you say, the book essentially the physical book becomes a souvenir of itself when you finish reading it, something that you can put on the shelf and that reminds you of that experience and that you can kind of use to recall and revisit that experience. Are there things like that exist for digital things? And I don't really know there are. I mean, people in the session raised some quite fun things. They were talking a bit about Goallo and Foursquare badges, which I don't entirely agree with, simply because I don't want a souvenir for every bar that I visit. There's a granularity that's slightly off there, but it's kind of pointing in the right direction. Nerd merit badges I liked more, because they tend to respond to big things like getting boing boings. And I've got a couple of nerd merit badges, and I'm very pleased about that. I don't actually have the physical things, but I keep meaning to order them. But I've had the experiences, and they do feel like things that qualify for that. But the data that we kind of starting to generate about our lives, and there's a whole nother debate to be had about the openness of that data and its portability, which is essentially a question about the ethics of that data. That data is becoming the kind of what used to be our physical records of shoeboxes full of photos and so on, and we really need to think about that kind of stuff because it's going to become more and more important.
Now, you also talked a fair amount about Wikipedia and the way that Wikipedia records history over time. Why are you so enthused about that?
I love Wikipedia. I don't know, I'm one of those sort of kids who read the dictionary, so Wikipedia is a kind of extension of that. I didn't really talk about it, but liked talking about this idea of sort of going for a walk through Wikipedia. That you can just go down, I call wiki holes, rabbit holes, that you just kind of disappear off down to a subject and follow these links all through, and it's fascinating. And in doing that, you're kind of constructing a narrative. You're kind of pulling together these different subjects, and you're creating your own particular path and sort of skein of knowledge as you pass through it. And then the other aspect of Wikipedia is that it illuminates the process of history. And the process of history has always been academic and expert. the dictionary process has always been a process for experts that's then kind of presented as a fait accompli to the public and to a general readership. And we've kind of turned that on the head with Wikipedia. But we can also see the process that goes into it, which gives us a massive more amount of kind of control and ability to participate in the construction of our own history, which is essentially what all great kind of socialist stuff has been arguing for about 100 years. This is an incredibly exciting technological addendum to that.
Fantastic. Now, I wanted to also ask you about your experience in the conference at large. Who have been some of the speakers that have inspired you so far?
There've been a bunch. Mike Migursky, the kind of way he explores data and the way he thinks about data is incredibly powerful thing. Mike's work and the whole of Stamen's work has been a big inspiration to me for a long time. The other strand that I've really picked up on, having the interests that I do, is the amount of stuff that's actually been spoken about books, which has been really interesting. So you had, opening it, you had Scott talking about his work on the Obama campaign, and then how he wrote this book, Designing Obama. And it's just fascinating. And then you had Craig as well talking about his work making books. And it's extraordinary to me that books... It's not extraordinary to me, but it's interesting to me that books are still essentially the primary cultural signifier. They're still the thing that kind of everybody thinks represents the greatest value. Whatever field you work in, you kind of ultimately you want to write a book or have one written about you. That's kind of the greatest achievement, still recognised in our culture. And working as I do, as I say, with publishers all the time, particularly publishers who don't like the internet, which is a lot of them. They genuinely believe that digital is out to kill them and the internet is out to destroy literature and books because books have no value in the age of the internet. And that's just rubbish. Digital people, web people, and the internet at large actually, I think, has a far higher regard for books and literary culture and the physical object of the book than we've seen for quite a long time. So all those kind of things, the book is now becoming a post-digital product is very exciting.
Fantastic. I have to say, James, it was a really, really interesting speech, and I really, really enjoyed the references to William Gibson as well.
Yeah, he's very important to me, so I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for coming and having a chat with us, mate. Cheers.